The scream that tore through the night air made Cole Xander drop his saddle and reach for his rifle before his mind could even process what he was hearing. He had been tending to his horses in the barn when the sound came from somewhere beyond his property line, desperate and raw in a way that made his blood run cold. Without thinking twice, he mounted his stallion bareback and rode hard toward the source, his heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum. The Montana Territory stretched out before him in the darkness, vast and unforgiving under the blanket of stars that lit the sky with their cold fire. It was June of 1878, and the land around Rawhide was still wild enough to swallow a person whole if they weren't careful. Cole knew every inch of his property and the surrounding range, but as he crested the hill that bordered his land, he saw something that didn't belong. A woman stood in the middle of what looked like the ruins of a small homestead, her dress torn and covered in soot, her hair loose and wild around her shoulders. She was alone, utterly alone, and as Cole drew closer, he could see she was shaking. The remains of a burned cabin smoldered behind her, sending up thin trails of smoke that disappeared into the night sky. "Madam," Cole called out as he approached, keeping his voice steady and calm. "Madam, are you hurt?" She spun around, and even in the darkness, Cole could see the tear tracks on her dirt-smudged face. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes that reflected the starlight like pools of water. For a moment she just stared at him, her chest heaving with ragged breaths, and then she seemed to crumple inward. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice hoarse from smoke or screaming or both. "They're all gone." Cole dismounted quickly, approaching her carefully like he would a spooked horse. "Who's gone? What happened here? My aunt and uncle, the fire." "I was outside. I was just outside for a few minutes, counting stars from the porch because I couldn't sleep. And then I smelled smoke, and by the time I realized what was happening, the whole cabin was already burning, and I couldn't get to them. I couldn't." Her words tumbled out in a frantic rush before she choked on a sob and pressed her hands to her face. Cole felt something twist in his chest. He had known loneliness, had known loss, but the raw grief pouring off this woman was like a physical force. He looked around at the smoking ruins, at the emptiness of the surrounding land, and made a decision that would change everything. "You can't stay here," he said gently. "There's nothing left to do tonight. Come back to my ranch. You can rest there, and in the morning we'll figure out what needs to be done." She looked at him with eyes that seemed to see right through him, weighing whether to trust this stranger who had appeared out of the darkness. Finally, she nodded, too exhausted and traumatized to argue. "I'm Cole Xander," he said, offering her his hand. "My ranch is just over that hill." "Penelope Jameson," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper as she took his hand. Her fingers were ice cold despite the warmth of the summer night. "Everyone calls me Penny." Cole helped her up onto his horse and mounted behind her, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her as they rode back to his property. He could feel her trembling against him, could hear the occasional hitch in her breathing that told him she was trying not to cry. He didn't say anything, just let his presence be a steady anchor as they made their way through the darkness. The Xander Ranch wasn't the biggest spread in Montana Territory, but it was respectable. Cole had built it up over the past 6 years with his own 2 hands, starting with nothing but a plot of land and a dream. The main house was solid timber construction with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, and the barn was sturdy enough to weather any storm. He had 3 hands who worked for him, good men who kept to themselves and did their jobs well. When they arrived, Cole's housekeeper, an older widow named Mrs. Sarah Chen who lived in a small cottage on the property, came hurrying out with a lantern. She took one look at Penny and immediately went into action, ushering the younger woman inside with gentle efficiency while firing questions at Cole about what had happened. "Fire at the old Jameson place," Cole explained shortly. "Her aunt and uncle didn't make it. She needs a place to stay." Mrs. Chen's weathered face softened with sympathy. "Poor child. Come on, dear, let's get you cleaned up and into bed. You've had a terrible shock." Cole watched them go, feeling strangely reluctant to let Penny out of his sight. He told himself it was just concern for someone who had been through trauma, nothing more. He had no business thinking about how her hand had felt in his, or how she had fit perfectly against him on the horse ride back. He was 30 years old and had been running his ranch alone for 6 years. In all that time, he had never once considered taking a wife. The work was too hard, the land too demanding, and he had nothing to offer a woman except long days and uncertain futures. He had accepted his solitude, had even embraced it. A lonely rancher counted himself lucky if he had good land, healthy livestock, and freedom from complications. But as he unsaddled his horse and tried to settle down for what remained of the night, Cole found his thoughts returning again and again to the woman in his guest room, to the grief in her eyes and the way she had stood alone in the ruins of her life, counting stars while everything burned. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June day that made a mockery of tragedy. Cole was up before sunrise as usual, going through his morning routine of checking on the animals and meeting with his ranch hands to discuss the day's work. Tom, Billy, and Frank were good men, all in their 40s, who had been with him for years. They already knew about what had happened at the Jameson place because news traveled fast in these parts, even without telephones or telegraphs. "The sheriff will want to investigate," Tom said, pushing his hat back on his head. "Make sure it wasn't arson or anything suspicious." Cole nodded. "I'll ride into town later and let him know. For now, keep an eye on things here. I want to make sure Miss Jameson is all right before I leave." When he entered the house through the kitchen door, he found Mrs. Chen already up and making breakfast. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air, comfortingly normal against the backdrop of last night's horror. "She's still sleeping," Mrs. Chen said before Cole could ask. "Poor thing cried herself into exhaustion around 3 in the morning. I heard her through the walls." Cole poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "What am I supposed to do, Sarah? I can't just turn her out, but I don't know her circumstances. She might have family somewhere who need to be notified." "Then you ask her when she wakes up," Mrs. Chen replied practically. "Feed her, let her grieve, and help her figure out her next steps. That's all anyone can do." It was nearly noon when Penny finally emerged from the guest room, wearing a clean dress that Mrs. Chen had found for her. It was a bit too big, but it was better than the smoke-damaged clothes from the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her face was pale but composed. "Thank you," she said to Cole when she found him in his study going over the ranch accounts. "For last night, for bringing me here." "It was the only decent thing to do," Cole replied, standing up. "Have you eaten? Mrs. Chen kept breakfast warm for you." Penny shook her head. "I'm not very hungry, but I suppose I should try." She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. "I need to go back to the homestead. I need to see if there's anything that can be done about my aunt and uncle." Cole had been expecting this. "I'll take you, but first, eat something. You'll need your strength." They sat together in the kitchen, an awkward silence stretching between them, broken only by the clink of silverware against plates. Penny picked at her food, managing only a few bites before pushing the plate away. "I came to live with them 6 months ago," she said suddenly, staring down at her hands. "After my parents died of fever back in Ohio. Aunt Martha was my mother's sister. She and Uncle George had homesteaded here 3 years ago, trying to make a go of it. They had no children of their own, so when they heard about my parents, they sent for me. "I'm sorry," Cole said, meaning it. "That's a lot of loss in a short time." Penny's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back determinedly. "I thought I was getting a second chance, you know. A new start in a new place. And now—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "We'll figure it out," Cole heard himself say. "One step at a time." The ride back to the Jameson homestead in daylight was even more sobering than the night before. The cabin was completely destroyed, nothing left but a blackened shell and piles of ash. Cole helped Penny search through the ruins, but there was little to salvage. They found the remains of her aunt and uncle in what had been their bedroom, and Cole made the grim arrangements to have the bodies taken into town for proper burial. Sheriff William Morrison arrived while they were still there, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He examined the site carefully, asking Penny detailed questions about the night before. "Best I can tell, it started in the kitchen," he said finally. "Probably a lamp that got knocked over or a spark from the stove. These old cabins go up fast, especially in dry weather." "I don't see any signs of foul play." Penny nodded numbly, seeming to shrink into herself. "What about the property?" Cole asked. "The land itself." "Belongs to Miss Jameson now, I suppose," the sheriff said, "being as she's the only living heir." The homestead claim was filed properly with the land office. It's 160 acres, not much developed beyond the cabin and a small barn. After the sheriff left, Cole turned to Penny, who was standing at the edge of what had been the front porch, staring out at the land. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't have any money. What little my aunt and uncle had was probably in the cabin. I have no skills beyond basic homemaking and needlework. I don't know how to work a ranch or farm. This land is useless to me." Cole was quiet for a moment, an idea forming in his mind. It was probably foolish, but something about this woman called to him in a way he didn't fully understand. "You could stay at my ranch while you figure things out," he said. "Mrs. Chen could use help around the house, and you could earn your keep that way. Give yourself some time to grieve and decide what you want to do next." Penny turned to look at him, surprise evident in her expression. "You would do that? You don't even know me." "I know you've had a terrible shock and you need help," Cole replied simply. "That's enough." For the first time since he had found her, something like hope flickered in Penny's eyes. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you. I promise I won't be a burden." "You won't be," Cole assured her, and realized he meant it. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both strange and natural. Penny threw herself into helping Mrs. Chen with the household tasks, and Cole found himself looking forward to meal times in a way he never had before. She was quiet at first, clearly still processing her grief, but gradually she began to open up. He learned that she was 23 years old, that she had grown up in a small town in Ohio where her father had been a blacksmith. She had been engaged once, to a young man who worked in her father's shop, but he had died in an accident 2 years before her parents succumbed to fever. She loved reading but had few books, enjoyed wildflowers and could name dozens of varieties, and had a dry sense of humor that occasionally broke through her sadness. Cole found himself telling her things he had never shared with anyone, about how he had come west after his own parents died, leaving behind a failing farm in Kansas. About the first hard winter when he had almost lost everything, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, about the loneliness that sometimes felt like a living thing. "Don't you ever want companionship?" Penny asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. It had become a habit, these evening conversations, and Cole looked forward to them more than he cared to admit. "I suppose I've gotten used to being alone," Cole said, though even as he spoke the words, they felt less true than they once had. "It's simpler this way." Penny was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I used to think I knew what loneliness was. After my fiancé died, after my parents died. But standing there last night, counting stars while everything burned behind me, that was a different kind of alone. If you hadn't come—" "But I did," Cole said firmly, "and you're not alone now." She turned to look at him, and something in her gaze made his heart skip a beat. "No," she agreed. "I'm not." It was during these evening talks that Cole began to realize he was falling for her. It crept up on him slowly, like dawn breaking over the prairie, until one day he looked at Penny and understood that his life had fundamentally changed. She was no longer just a woman he was helping out of charity. She had become essential to him in ways he couldn't fully articulate, but Cole kept these feelings to himself. Penny was vulnerable, grieving, dependent on his hospitality. It would be wrong to burden her with his emotions when she was still finding her footing. So he contented himself with these evening conversations, with the sound of her laughter when something amused her, with the way she hummed while she worked in the garden. August arrived with blazing heat and the constant work of haying season. Cole and his men worked from dawn until dusk, cutting and baling the hay that would feed the cattle through winter. It was back-breaking labor, but necessary, and Cole threw himself into it with perhaps more vigor than usual, trying to work off the restless energy that seemed to fill him whenever Penny was near. One afternoon, he came back to the house earlier than usual to get fresh water and found Penny in the kitchen, standing on a stool to reach something on a high shelf. The stool wobbled, and without thinking, Cole rushed forward and caught her around the waist just as she lost her balance. For a moment they were frozen there, his hands on her waist, her hands gripping his shoulders for balance. They were close enough that Cole could see the golden flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender soap on her skin. His heart was pounding, and not from exertion. "Thank you," Penny said breathlessly. She didn't step away immediately, and neither did Cole. "You should be more careful," he managed to say, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "I will," she promised, but she was still looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then Mrs. Chen bustled into the kitchen, and the moment broke. Cole stepped back, letting his hands fall to his sides, and Penny climbed down from the stool with decidedly pink cheeks. That night, Cole couldn't focus on their usual conversation. He found himself watching the way the lamplight played across Penny's features, the way she tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear, the curve of her smile when she talked about finding a family of rabbits in the garden that morning. He wanted to reach across the space between them and take her hand, wanted to tell her everything he was feeling, but he held back. She deserves better than a lonely rancher, he told himself. She deserves someone who can give her more than a hard life on an isolated ranch. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was a Saturday in late August when trouble arrived at the Xander ranch in the form of 3 men on horseback. Cole was in the yard when they rode up, and something about their demeanor immediately put him on edge. They had the look of drifters, the kind of men who made their living on the wrong side of the law. "Help you gentlemen?" Cole asked, his hand resting casually on his hip near his pistol. The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, grinned unpleasantly. "Heard you got a woman staying here. Pretty thing with dark hair. We'd like to have a word with her." Cole's jaw tightened. "Don't know what business you could have with Miss Jameson, but she's under my protection. State your business or move along." "Our business is that she's sitting on land that should be ours," the man said, his grin fading. "Her uncle owed our boss money, a lot of money. The land is collateral." "That's between you and the sheriff," Cole said firmly. "Now get off my property." The three men exchanged looks, and Cole could see them calculating odds. His ranch hands had heard the commotion and were emerging from the barn, and suddenly the visitors were outnumbered. The leader spat into the dust and jerked his horse's head around. "This ain't over," he called back as they rode off. "Tell the woman we'll be back with papers to prove the debt." Cole watched them disappear in a cloud of dust, his mind already working through the implications. If there was a legitimate debt, Penny could lose the only asset she had left. And even if there wasn't, men like that didn't give up easily. When he went inside to tell Penny what had happened, he found her standing by the window, her face pale. "I heard," she said. Uncle George did mention some business dealings that had gone sour, but he never said anything about owing money. He wouldn't have. He was too proud. "We'll sort it out," Cole assured her, though he felt far from certain himself. "Tomorrow we'll ride into town and talk to the sheriff. Find out if there's any legal claim to the land." That night, Penny didn't come out to the porch for their usual talk. Cole sat alone, looking up at the vast expanse of stars, and felt that old familiar loneliness settle over him like a cold blanket. But now it was different, because he knew what it felt like to have company, to have someone who made the silence comfortable instead of oppressive. He realized with sudden clarity that he didn't want to go back to being alone. More than that, he didn't want Penny to leave. The thought of her moving on, of never seeing her smile or hearing her laugh again, was physically painful. A lonely rancher counted himself lucky if he had good land and healthy livestock. He had always thought. But now he understood that he had been lying to himself. Real luck was having someone to share it all with, someone to count stars with on warm summer nights, someone to build a life beside. The next morning, Cole and Penny rode into Rawhide together. The town was bustling with weekend activity, cowboys and ranchers coming in to stock up on supplies and blow off steam at the saloons. The sheriff's office was near the center of town, a sturdy building with iron bars on the windows. Sheriff Morrison listened to their story with a grave expression, then pulled out a thick ledger book. "I'll need to check with the land office and see if any liens have been filed against the Jameson property," he said. "Give me a few hours." While they waited, Cole took Penny to the general store to pick up some supplies. The proprietor, a friendly man named Mr. Henderson, greeted them warmly and seemed pleased to help Penny select some fabric for new dresses. As they browsed, Cole noticed several townspeople watching them with speculative interest. "They're wondering about us," Penny said quietly when they were alone in one aisle. "About what our relationship is." Cole met her eyes. "Does that bother you?" "No," she said after a moment. "Should it?" Before Cole could answer, a woman's voice called out, "Penelope Jameson, is that really you?" A well-dressed woman in her 30s approached, her face lit with recognition. "I'm Margaret Sullivan. I met you and your aunt at church a few months back. I was so sorry to hear about the fire." "Thank you," Penny said, managing a small smile. Mrs. Sullivan's eyes darted between Penny and Cole with undisguised curiosity. "And are you too?" "Miss Jameson is staying at my ranch while she sorts out her affairs," Cole said firmly, offering no further explanation. But he noticed Penny's cheeks flush, and he wondered what she was thinking. When they returned to the sheriff's office that afternoon, Morrison had news. "I checked the records. There's no lien on the property, no legal debt registered. Whatever your uncle might have owed was likely a private matter if it existed at all. As far as the law is concerned, that land is yours free and clear, Miss Jameson." Relief washed over Penny's face, but Cole felt his worry deepen. "That won't stop those men from causing trouble," he said. "If they think they have a claim, legal or not, they might try to take it by force. The sheriff nodded grimly. "I'll keep an eye out and make inquiries about who they work for. In the meantime, Miss Jameson, you might want to consider selling the land. Get what you can for it and move somewhere safer." On the ride back to the ranch, Penny was unusually quiet. Cole gave her space, understanding that she had a lot to think about. But as they approached the property line, she suddenly pulled her horse to a stop. "I don't want to sell," she said, looking out at the rolling hills bathed in late afternoon sun. "That land is all I have left of my family. It's my only security, my only future, but I don't know how to protect it or work it or make anything of it." She turned to Cole with tears in her eyes. "I feel so helpless." Cole guided his horse closer until he was right beside her. "You're not helpless, and you're not alone in this." He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to take a leap that might change everything. "Penny, what if we merge the properties? My ranch and your land share a border. Together, it would be a sizable spread. We could make it work." She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole's heart was pounding, but he pressed on. "I know this isn't how things are usually done. I know you might not feel the same way I do. But these past few months, having you here, talking with you every evening, watching you bring life to this place, I've realized something. I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want you to leave." Penny stared at him, her eyes wide. "Cole, I'm not saying you have to answer right now," he continued quickly. "I know you're still grieving, still figuring out your life, but I needed you to know how I feel. I care about you, Penny, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." A tear slipped down Penny's cheek, but she was smiling. "You foolish man," she said softly. "Do you think I haven't noticed? Do you think I haven't been feeling the same way, fighting it because I thought you were just being kind, that you couldn't possibly want someone like me?" Cole felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "Someone like you. Penny, you're everything I never knew I needed. You're brave and strong and kind, and when I'm with you, I don't feel lonely anymore." "I don't either," she admitted. "When I'm with you, counting stars from the porch, talking about everything and nothing, I feel safe. I feel like I've found a home." Cole reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "Then marry me. We'll combine the properties, build something together. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." Penny laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Cole Xander, I'll marry you. This lonely rancher can count himself lucky forever, because I was alone counting stars that night when you found me, and somehow that brought us both exactly what we needed." Cole felt joy surge through him, bright and fierce. He dismounted and helped Penny down from her horse, and there in the middle of the prairie, with nothing but grass and sky around them, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but then Penny's arms came around his neck, and she kissed him back with a passion that made his head spin. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy," he promised. "I know," Penny said. "That's why I'm not afraid anymore." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Then they rode the rest of the way back to the ranch together, their horses side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, both of them filled with a hope that felt as wide and endless as the Montana sky. That evening they shared their news with Mrs. Chen, who cried with happiness and immediately began planning the wedding. "Nothing too fancy," Penny insisted. "Just something simple and meaningful. At the church in town," Mrs. Chen suggested, "with a reception here at the ranch afterward." "That sounds perfect," Cole agreed, unable to stop smiling. But their happiness was short-lived. 2 days later, the 3 men returned, this time with 5 more riders. They set up camp just beyond Cole's property line, clearly intending to intimidate. Cole rode out to confront them, backed by his ranch hands. The scarred leader was there again, looking more determined than before. "We've got paperwork now," he said, waving a document. "Shows that George Jameson took a loan from our boss, Mr. Dalton, using the land as collateral. The debt is due, and since it hasn't been paid, the land belongs to Mr. Dalton now." "Let me see that," Cole demanded. He took the paper and examined it carefully. It looked official enough, with signatures and a notary seal, but something felt off. "This is dated 2 months after George Jameson died. How could he have signed it when he was already dead?" The leader's face darkened. "The signature must be backdated. The loan itself is older." "Then you'll need to prove that to the sheriff and the land office," Cole said firmly, handing the paper back. "Until then, you're trespassing on property that borders mine, and I'm within my rights to ask you to leave." "We're not on your land," the man snarled. "And we're not leaving until Miss Jameson signs over the property." "That's not going to happen," Cole said. "Now, I'll give you until sundown to move on, or I'm going to the sheriff." The standoff lasted a tense moment before the leader spat into the dirt and jerked his head at his men to fall back. But as Cole and his hands rode away, he could feel the weight of their stares, could sense that this was far from over. That night, Cole doubled the watch on the ranch. He didn't trust those men not to try something under cover of darkness. Penny wanted to stay up with him, but he convinced her to get some rest, though he could see the worry in her eyes. "We'll sort this out," he promised her, pulling her close. "I won't let anyone take what's yours." "Ours," she corrected softly. "We're in this together now." The next morning, Cole rode into town alone to speak with the sheriff. Morrison examined the document with a critical eye and shared Cole's suspicions. "This doesn't look right to me," the sheriff said. "The signature doesn't match the one George Jameson used on his original land claim. I think it's a forgery, but proving that will take time, and men like this don't usually have patience." "What do you suggest?" Cole asked. "I'll send a telegram to the territorial marshal, get some official help out here. In the meantime, you keep yourself and Miss Jameson safe. Don't do anything that could provoke them into violence." Cole returned to the ranch to find Penny in the garden, pulling weeds with perhaps more force than necessary. She looked up when she heard his horse, and he could see the strain on her face. "The sheriff thinks the document is forged," he told her. "He's contacting the marshal. But it might take a week or more for help to arrive." Penny stood up, brushing dirt from her hands. "I won't let them intimidate us. This is our home, our future. I've lost too much already to let some criminals take what little I have left." Cole admired her courage even as he worried about her safety. "We'll be smart about this. No unnecessary risks." But fate had other plans. That afternoon, while Cole was out checking fence lines with Tom and Billy, Frank came riding up at a gallop. "Riders approaching the house," he gasped. "At least 6 of them. I came to get you." Cole's blood ran cold. "Mrs. Chen and Penny are there alone." They rode back at breakneck speed, Cole's heart in his throat. As they crested the hill above the ranch house, he could see the riders in the yard. Penny was on the porch, standing tall despite being obviously frightened, and Mrs. Chen was beside her with a rifle. Cole and his men thundered into the yard, and the intruders turned to face them. The scarred leader was at the front, and now Cole could see another man with him, older and better dressed, who had the look of someone used to giving orders. "That's enough," Cole said, his hand on his pistol. "You're on my property now, and I want you gone." The older man smiled coldly. "Mr. Xander, I presume. I'm Henry Dalton. I'm here to collect on a debt your fiancé's uncle owed me." "There is no debt," Cole said flatly. "And the document you've shown is a forgery. The sheriff has already contacted the territorial marshal. Dalton's smile didn't waver. That's a serious accusation. Are you prepared to prove it? Are you prepared to go to jail for fraud? Cole shot back. The tension in the yard was thick enough to cut. Cole could see his ranch hands spreading out, could see Penny's white-knuckled grip on the porch railing. One wrong move and this could turn into a bloodbath. Then, unexpectedly, Penny stepped forward. "Mr. Dalton, if you truly believe my uncle owed you money, then take your claim to a court of law. But if you're trying to steal my land through intimidation and forgery, you should know that I'm not alone. I have people who will stand with me, and I won't be bullied." Cole felt a surge of pride and love. This was the woman who had stood alone counting stars while everything burned, who had picked herself up from utter devastation and found the strength to keep going. She was magnificent. Dalton's eyes narrowed as he studied Penny. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "You've got spirit, Miss Jameson." "I can respect that, but spirit doesn't change facts. Your uncle did owe me money, regardless of what that document says. The paper might be bad, but the debt was real." "Then prove it," Cole said. "Prove it legally or get off my land and leave Miss Jameson alone." For a long moment, Dalton stared at them, clearly weighing his options. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well. We'll see what the marshal has to say, but this isn't over." He gestured to his men and they rode out, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. As soon as they were gone, Penny's knees seemed to give out. Cole was there in an instant, catching her and holding her close. "It's all right," he murmured. "You were so brave." "I was terrified," she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. "But I meant what I said. I won't let them take this from us." Mrs. Chen came down from the porch, still carrying the rifle. "That man is dangerous," she said quietly. "He won't give up easily." Cole knew she was right, but he also knew that he would do whatever it took to protect Penny and their future together. "We'll be ready for whatever comes," he said with more confidence than he felt. The next week was tense. Dalton's men remained camped nearby, a constant reminder of the threat hanging over them. Cole kept someone on watch at all times, and he made sure Penny was never alone outside the house. The wedding plans were put on hold, much to everyone's disappointment. But through it all, Cole and Penny grew closer. They spent their evenings not just talking now, but planning their future together. They discussed how to work both properties, where to build additional barns, whether to increase the cattle herd or try raising horses. They talked about the house they would build together, bigger than the current one, with enough room for the family they hoped to have someday. "I want at least 4 children," Penny said one night, a dreamy look in her eyes. "A house full of noise and laughter." "I want whatever makes you happy," Cole replied, taking her hand. "Although I have to admit the idea of children with your spirit and courage is both exciting and terrifying." Penny laughed. "They'll have your stubbornness and work ethic. We'll have our hands full." These moments of normalcy, of hope and planning, kept them going through the uncertainty. Cole found himself falling more in love with Penny every day, amazed by her resilience and her ability to find joy even in difficult circumstances. Finally, 8 days after the confrontation, the territorial marshal arrived. Marshal James Tucker was a weathered man in his 50s with keen eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened to both sides of the story, examined all the documents, and then announced that he would need to investigate further. "I'll need to check with the Territorial Records Office, verify signatures, interview witnesses," he said. "This could take several weeks." Cole felt frustration rise in his chest, but Penny squeezed his hand. "At least there's someone official looking into it now," she said quietly. "That's progress." The marshal did make one immediate ruling: Dalton and his men had to leave the area until the investigation was complete. "I won't have you lot trying to intimidate witnesses or interfere with my work," Tucker said firmly. "You'll get word when I've made my decision." Dalton looked furious, but he had no choice but to comply. As he and his men rode away, Cole felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. At least they would have some peace while the investigation proceeded. That night, Cole and Penny finally returned to their evening ritual on the porch. The stars were brilliant in the clear Montana sky, and Penny tipped her head back to look at them. "I was counting stars the night you found me," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep, so I went outside to look at the sky. I remember thinking how beautiful it was, how peaceful. And then everything went wrong." Cole put his arm around her shoulders, "but it also brought us together." "Yes," she agreed, leaning into him. "I was alone and lost, and you found me. You gave me a reason to keep going." "You gave me a reason too," Cole said. "I didn't realize how lonely I was until you were here. A lonely rancher counts himself lucky if he has good land and livestock, I always thought. But that's nothing compared to the luck of finding someone to share it with." Penny turned in his arms to look at him. "Do you really think we'll be able to resolve this? That Dalton will leave us alone?" "I do," Cole said, willing it to be true. "The truth is on our side. Your uncle didn't sign that document and there's no legitimate debt. The marshal will figure that out. And then we can get married." Penny asked with a small smile. "Then we can get married," Cole confirmed, "and start building our life together." They kissed under the stars, and Cole felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was where he was meant to be, with this woman in his arms under this vast sky. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, life on the ranch returned to something like normal. Cole and his men worked the land, bringing in the last of the hay and preparing for fall roundup. Penny and Mrs. Chen kept the household running smoothly, and Penny started talking about plans for a larger vegetable garden and maybe even a small orchard. Cole loved watching her settle into ranch life, loved seeing her confidence grow as she learned new skills and found her place. She had a natural way with animals and started helping him with the horses, learning to handle them with a gentle firmness that won their trust. One afternoon, Cole took her out to see the full extent of their combined properties, riding the boundaries of both his ranch and her inherited land. The view from the highest point was spectacular, rolling grassland stretching to distant mountains, dotted with cattle and crossed by clear streams. "This is ours," Cole said, gesturing to the landscape. "All of this. We can build something amazing here, Penny, something to last generations." "I can see it," Penny said, her eyes shining. "I can see the house we'll build, the children we'll raise. I can see us growing old together, counting stars from the porch every night." Cole kissed her then, pouring all his love and hope and dreams into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he knew with absolute certainty that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted choosing him. When the marshal finally returned with his findings, he called a meeting at the sheriff's office. Cole and Penny rode in together, both nervous but ready to face whatever came. "I've completed my investigation," Marshal Tucker announced. "I've verified that the signature on the loan document is indeed a forgery. George Jameson's real signature looks quite different, and I found several witnesses who testified that Jameson never had any business dealings with Henry Dalton. Furthermore, I discovered that Dalton has a history of this kind of fraud in other territories. He targets recently deceased homesteaders, forges debt documents, and tries to intimidate the heirs into signing over the property." Relief flooded through Cole. "So the land is legally Penny's, completely and without question," the marshal confirmed. I've issued a warrant for Dalton's arrest. He and his men are wanted for fraud and attempted extortion. Miss Jameson, you're free to do whatever you want with that property." Penny's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Marshal. Thank you so much." As they left the sheriff's office, Cole swept Penny into his arms and spun her around, right there in the middle of Main Street. She laughed, a sound of pure joy, and several passers-by smiled at their obvious happiness. "We can get married now," Cole said. "No more delays, no more waiting." "Marry me, Penny, as soon as we can arrange it." "Yes," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married 2 weeks later on a beautiful September morning at the church in Rawhide. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony, and Cole's ranch hands cleaned up remarkably well in their Sunday best. Half the town turned out, curious about the romance that had blossomed from tragedy. Penny wore a dress of pale blue silk that Mrs. Sullivan and some of the other town ladies had helped her make, and Cole thought she had never looked more beautiful. As they stood before the minister and exchanged vows, he felt his heart swell with an emotion too big for words. "I promise to love you through all seasons," he said when it was his turn. "To stand beside you in hardship and in joy, to build a life with you that honors both of our families and creates something new and beautiful." "I promise to be your partner and your friend," Penny replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "To count stars with you every night, to fill our home with love and laughter, and to never forget how lucky we both are to have found each other." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with all the love in his heart, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception at the ranch was a joyful affair, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Cole danced with his bride under the stars, the same stars she had been counting that terrible night when everything changed. But now those stars seemed to shine with promise instead of loneliness. "Happy?" he asked as they swayed together. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Penny replied. "A few months ago I was alone and grieving with no idea what my future would hold, and now I have you and a home and a life I'm excited to live." A lonely rancher counted himself lucky, Cole said with a smile. "Forever," Penny finished. "Because I was counting stars from the porch alone, and you found me." They kissed again as their guests cheered, and Cole knew that he had indeed counted himself lucky. The luckiest man alive. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and joy in equal measure. They spent the fall and winter consolidating the two properties, filing all the necessary paperwork to officially merge them into one large ranch. Cole built additions onto the house, creating more space for the family they planned, and Penny threw herself into making it a real home. She proved to be a natural rancher's wife, learning quickly and never complaining about the long hours or difficult work. She could ride fence line, doctor sick cattle, keep the books, and still have dinner ready at the end of a hard day. Cole fell more in love with her with each passing week. Their evenings remained sacred, a time when they would sit on the porch and talk about their day, their dreams, their plans. Sometimes they would count stars, remembering that terrible and wonderful night that had brought them together. But mostly they just enjoyed being together, comfortable in the silence or engaged in deep conversation. In the spring, Penny began feeling ill in the mornings. Mrs. Chen took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "You're with child," she announced happily. Penny's eyes went wide, then filled with tears of joy. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be," Mrs. Chen replied. "You should see the doctor in town to confirm it, but all the signs are there." When Penny told Cole that evening, he was speechless with joy. He pulled her into his arms and held her close, feeling humbled and awed by the miracle of it. "We're going to be parents," he said wonderingly. Our family is growing. Are you happy? Penny asked, though she could surely see the answer in his face. I'm beyond happy, Cole assured her. I'm grateful and excited and a little terrified all at once, Penny laughed. Me too, but we'll figure it out together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Cole became ridiculously protective, not wanting Penny to overwork or take any risks. She tolerated his hovering with good-natured patience, though she did draw the line when he suggested she stop riding horses entirely. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she said firmly. I'll be careful, but I'm not going to stop living my life. Their son was born in early December, during a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white. The labor was long and difficult, and Cole paced the hall outside their bedroom like a caged animal, listening to Penny's cries and feeling helpless. When the midwife from town finally called him in and placed the baby in his arms, Cole felt his world shift on its axis. He's perfect, he whispered, staring down at the tiny red face and shock of dark hair. Penny, he's absolutely perfect. Penny, exhausted but glowing, smiled up at him. He has your chin, she said softly. They named him Samuel, after Cole's father, and Xander discovered that his heart had even more capacity for love than he had realized. Watching Penny with their son, seeing her gentle patience and natural mothering instinct, made him fall in love with her all over again. The winter was hard, as Montana winters always were, but the house was warm with love and the sound of a baby's laughter. Sam was a good baby, curious and alert, and he brought an energy to the ranch that transformed it from a house into a true home. As spring came again, and Sam grew stronger, Cole and Penny would take him out onto the porch in the evenings. Penny would hold their son and point out the stars, telling him about the night his father had found her, about how their family began from loss and loneliness and became something beautiful. We'll tell him the whole story when he's old enough, Penny said one evening, smiling down at Sam's sleeping face. About how brave his grandparents and great-aunt and uncle were, about how his father rescued his mother, about how love can bloom even in the hardest circumstances. It's a good story, Cole agreed, putting his arm around his wife and son. Our story. 2 years later, their daughter was born, a fierce little thing they named Martha after Penny's aunt. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn determination, and from the moment she entered the world, she made her presence known with lusty cries. Sam adored his baby sister, and Cole loved watching them together, seeing the family he and Penny had created flourish. The ranch prospered too. With both properties working together, they were able to increase their herd significantly. Cole hired 2 more hands, and they built a larger barn and additional outbuildings. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Sam learned to ride when he was 4, sitting in front of his father on Cole's favorite stallion. Martha followed when she was 3, refusing to be left behind. They had 2 more children, another son they named Henry and a daughter called Grace, and the house rang with the noise and laughter that Penny had always dreamed of. Cole and Penny grew older together, their love deepening with time and shared experience. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years and struggled through bad ones, but they did it all together. The evening ritual of sitting on the porch never changed, though now they often had children climbing on them or asking endless questions. Tell us the story of the stars, Martha would demand, her favorite tale. And Penny would tell them again, about counting stars from the porch alone on a terrible night, about a lonely rancher who came riding out of the darkness, about how their family began with a rescue and became something neither parent had dared to dream of. When Sam was 18 and ready to take on more responsibility at the ranch, Cole found himself thinking about how fast the years had gone. His son was a man now, capable and hardworking, with dreams of his own. Martha was 16 and as wild as the Montana wind, already breaking hearts in town. Henry was 12 and bookish, more interested in learning than ranching, and Grace was 10 and loved the horses more than anything. "We did good," Penny said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. The children were all inside, arguing good-naturedly about something, and for a moment it was just the two of them. "We did," Cole agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you remember what you said that first night after we decided to get married?" Penny asked. "About being a lonely rancher. A lonely rancher counted himself lucky if he had good land and healthy livestock," Cole quoted. "But I was wrong. The real luck was finding you." Penny leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so lost that night. Standing in the ruins of everything I knew, counting stars because I didn't know what else to do. I thought my life was over." "And instead it was just beginning," Cole said softly. "For both of us," Penny agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside came the sound of their children's laughter, the clatter of dishes, the comfortable chaos of family life. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to their hard work and partnership. Cole thought about that night so long ago when he had heard a scream and ridden out without thinking. He had expected to find trouble, maybe danger. He had never expected to find love, to find the other half of himself, to find everything that had been missing from his life. "Thank you," he said quietly. Penny looked up at him. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on a lonely rancher. For building this life with me." "Thank you for finding me," Penny replied. "For seeing me on my worst night and choosing to help instead of riding away. For giving me a reason to hope again." They kissed, gentle and familiar, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they pulled apart, Penny smiled and gestured to the sky. "Count with me," she asked, as she had so many times over the years. "Always," Cole promised. And so they sat together on the porch they had built, on the land they had combined and nurtured, surrounded by the family they had created, and counted stars. One by one, the stars emerged, steady and eternal, witnesses to their love story. Inside, their children settled down for the night, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and cherished. The ranch hands finished their work and retreated to the bunkhouse, content with their jobs and the fair treatment they received. Mrs. Chen, now elderly but still sharp, puttered in the kitchen, pleased with the family she had helped raise. And on the porch, Cole and Penny remained hand in hand, watching the heavens. She had been counting stars from the porch alone on the worst night of her life, lost and grieving and hopeless. He had been a lonely rancher who thought solitude was the same as contentment, but they had found each other in the darkness, and together they had built something beautiful. Together they had created a home, a family, a legacy. Together they had proven that sometimes the greatest luck comes from the most unlikely circumstances, that love can bloom in the midst of tragedy, that two lonely souls can find each other even under the vast Montana sky. The lonely rancher counted himself lucky forever, not for the land or the livestock or the prosperity, but for the woman beside him, for the family they had created, for every single day they had been blessed to share. And the woman who had been alone counting stars had found her home, her love, her purpose. Their story, born from ashes and despair, had become something neither could have imagined. A testament to resilience, to hope, to the transformative power of love. And as they sat together counting stars, they knew that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them as they always had, side by side, heart to heart, forever grateful for the night that had changed everything. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, constant and unchanging, and Cole and Penny watched them together, counting softly, their voices mingling in the warm summer air. This was their ritual, their reminder, their celebration of all they had overcome and all they had built. A lonely rancher had counted himself lucky, and he was right. Lucky in love, lucky in family, lucky in the life they had created from nothing. And it had all started on a terrible night when a woman stood alone counting stars, and a man came riding out of the darkness to change both their lives forever.